I'm joined here with Knut, Alex, Jason. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin books. We've all got books out, some recently, some about to come out. We're going to have a little roundtable, talk about writing on Bitcoin, why it's important, why we like to do it, why we're going to keep doing it, hopefully. And hopefully, have a good talk here. So why don't we just go through really quick? We'll just do a my left and on, and we'll just introduce ourselves and maybe mention your work real quick.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Jason Maier.
All right, everyone. All right, I'll give you a minute or two to...
All right.
Okay, great.
No, we're gonna just roll ahead. So appreciate that minute or two, but I think we're just gonna keep going.
I think they're dubbing us to Dutch in real time. The AI revolution is fantastic.
So
it's incredible.
The next
Real-time
session we
translation.
have is a little longer.
You guys are all hearing that too, right? It's not just okay.
All right.
The other stage, got it. Okay.
Okay. So my name is Jason Maier, and I am the author of A Progressive's Case for Bitcoin. Absolutely thrilled to be here, talk about the book and the book writing process and how really what we can contribute to the space. So thank you for having me, and yeah.
Oh, so Svetski.
I can hear you, brother.
Okay, shit. Mark Communist Manifesto last year. I published Times every year, which is a collection of 6 specific essays written around a particular topic. So last year we did the Austrian edition, for example, with Seyfedin, Pierre, etc. 21 editions over 21 years. Okay, and I'm going to continue. So I do the Bitcoin Times, wrote the Uncommunist Manifesto, and I've got the Bushido of Bitcoin coming up next year, which is going to be a bit of a radical book, something that hasn't been written about Bitcoin before. It's a bit more of a Bitcoin culture book, not why we need Bitcoin, but what we should do after we win with Bitcoin.
We have one already. Can you hear me? Pass it on. Hello. How you doing? Yeah, I'm Knut Svanholm. I've written 3 books about Bitcoin. Bitcoin Sovereignty Through Mathematics, Bitcoin Independence Reimagined, and Bitcoin Everything Divided by 21 Million. And my most recent book is a book about praxiology called Praxiology, the Invisible Hand That Feeds You. And my main thing as of now is being the host of the Freedom Footprint show, which is a pod about Bitcoin and philosophy. And I occasionally write articles and make little movies from them.
Am I now off? Here we go. I'm back on. All right. Appreciate you guys dealing with our. We're writers. We're not audio technicians. So we're working on that. Well, all right. Well, since you got the mic, Alex, let's just start at the beginning. What made you look at the Bitcoin writing space and go, I need to get my stuff in there. What was it? Was it a reactionary thing to what was going on? Was it just an impulse from you that you just needed to put this out? What got you starting to write?
I actually started writing on, so I've been writing privately since I was a kid, and I've got all sorts of records dating back 15 years now of just writing stuff, and I didn't start writing publicly until Medium sort of came around, medium.com in 2015, and this was sort of when I was first discovering Bitcoin, so I didn't know anything or anything like that, so I didn't write about Bitcoin initially. If you go back through my Medium, you'll find the first articles were me just ranting about being a startup founder, because that's sort of my background. I have a business background more than anything else, entrepreneurial, and I just started slowly as I got interested. I climbed Mount Stupid, obviously. I went and found my way into shitcoins and then came down really quickly, and I kind of wrote a little bit about my journey, and I think that maybe just captured some people. And I remember the first article that I wrote that really took off was Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash. And that one, I think Tour de Mister actually picked it up, and Giacomo, and they retweeted, and this was the first time I was ever on Twitter. I didn't know anything about Twitter, and after that, I don't know, I think I just accidentally established myself as a bit of a Bitcoin writer, and people liked it, and I just did stuff on Medium on a regular basis, but it was actually Mr. CK here who reached out to me once, and he's like, dude, we got to published some of your work on Bitcoin Magazine. That's when I actually started more regularly writing about Bitcoin in a specific sort of like, I'm writing about Bitcoin on a regular basis. And yeah, here we are a couple years later.
Yeah, CK has influenced a lot of our lives for sure. Big shout out to CK. We love him. He's great.
Woo!
Yes, a round of applause for sure. I also wanted to say I really appreciate the talking about the Mount Stupid and the coming through the shitcoin thing, because I feel like that's something that Bitcoin writers especially and figures just like to pretend didn't happen or ignore. And I think when you're trying to establish like being a genuine voice and a sincere voice, you should talk about your past and that whole thing. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah, cheers. All right, well, let's pass the mic. Yeah, either way, either or. Yeah, similar thing, Jason. I know you just put out, Progressive Case for Bitcoin. What got you started on this? How did you get into Bitcoin, and how did you get into Bitcoin writing?
Yeah, I got into Bitcoin like most people, right? I have a really weird friend who's super smart and was like, hey, you should get into Bitcoin. And so I did. And, like a lot of people, I just dove in and wanted to learn more and more. And as soon as, I got to that point, I was like, well, the book that I want to read doesn't really exist. Like the conversation and the way of sort of understanding it isn't out there already. And so I locked myself in a windowless room for 8 months and wrote the book that I wanted to read and the book that I wanted to be able to hand to people and not have to say like, this is going to get you into Bitcoin, but skip chapter 6 because you're not going to like it. I just wrote the book. So, ultimately, the book is an expression of really where I come from. My day job is a teacher. I teach high school mathematics, and that's been sort of my passion for many years, for decades. And the drive for the book wasn't like a political push to say, like, we need this political voice out there. It was from an education point of view. It was pedagogy saying, if you want somebody to learn something as complicated and as important as Bitcoin, you need to make sure that they have a resource that they're comfortable with. And so the book is, my experience in the book and from people talking to me has been exactly that. Like, I'm not buying this book for myself. I'm buying it for a friend of mine who I really care about. And that was really the push behind it. That's why I wrote it, is so people who are into Bitcoin already can hand it to somebody who isn't, get them from 0 to 1.
Amazing. Knut, if we can reach the mic over there. Yeah, talk to us, man. I mean, you've been, multi-medium articles, podcasts, translations, everything. Talk to us how you got into it and, why you do it.
Yeah, I started writing about Bitcoin in 2017. I discovered it around 14, 15, and then attended an online course in 2016 about digital currencies in plural. But I'm proud to say that the first article I published on Medium was called First Mover Advantage, and I made a comparison of, like, what would you rather own, the first Donald Duck magazine or the best Donald Duck magazine? And, like, there's a case to be made for the first one being more valuable to more people, because which is the best one is subjective. So I compared that between two. So I've been a maxi all along. And similar to Alex, like the first article that took off was one about how to take control of your own keys during the Bitcoin trash hard fork. And then just to see how self-publishing was, I compiled the articles into a small book called 3-Minute Reads on Bitcoin. But then that was the only book I had to my name, and I wasn't really proud of it, so I thought, well, I better write a proper book about Bitcoin. So I wrote one called Sovereignty Through Mathematics, and I brought it to Riga in 2019. 50 books, gave 25 away and sold the rest, and then that book sort of got a life of its own, and I've been writing ever since. I should mention I wrote an article called Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole for Citadel 21 magazine, the Hodlonauts publication, which had a sentence in it that said, imagine everything there is and everything there will be divided by 21 million. And then we made a little video out of that where this equation, the visualization was this equation, and then my life changed a lot.
Yeah, amazing. Why keep the mic. I think something that's very important and seems to be a very common thing in the Bitcoin space in regards to publishing books is finding the right person to do your forward. And as as someone who's published a bunch of books here, you've had some great writers write some forwards for your books. You mind talking to us about what that process is like? Why would you want to bring in another writer to introduce your work, and how you kind of chose the folks you did?
Yeah, I didn't have a forward writer for Sovereignty Through Mathematics, the first book, because I mean, I wasn't a name back then, or I didn't know anyone really. But for the second book, Independence Reimagined, I asked Hodlonaut to write the forward because we had become friends over the years, and he did. And then when I finally left my fiat job and decided to do Bitcoin stuff full-time, I moved down to Spain, and within a week, I get an SMS from Jeff Booth saying that, hey man, we're traveling around Europe. Can we come around your house and visit you in 2 weeks from now? And I'm like, holy shit, Jeff Booth wants to meet me. And then we had some steaks, and we chatted all night and played some guitar and stuff, and then he decided to write the forward to Everything Divided by 21 Million. And now, more recently, we combined the first two books into one book called Sovereignty and Independence. So that's the first two books in one. And Prince Philip was friendly enough to write the forward for that. And for the praxiology book, Rahim Tagesadigan wrote the forward, who's like, all these people are my idols, so I'm very proud of the forwards.
Very cool. Awesome. Svetski, I was curious, you've done work in a collaborative way with Mark Moss and obviously with the BTC Times. How do you approach it differently working with a collaborator? How did you guys actually go about doing that? Were you separating piece by piece? Were you working paragraph by paragraph? How did you guys come and collaborate and work on that stuff together?
Yeah, I mean, so that book was the Uncommunist Manifesto. That one was, we had no idea how to write a book, obviously. So we just hired an Airbnb, and we heard somewhere like, the little Bitcoin book with Jimmy Song and everything was written as a book sprint. So we're like, we should do a book sprint. And we're like, what's a book sprint? I was like, I don't fucking know. Just get into a house and just write. So we went and did that. And we kind of split the book up into, because the original Communist Manifesto had 4 chapters. And it was never a book. The Communist Manifesto was was like a manifesto that was written, right? So it just had 4 sections. So it just later got turned into a book with 4 chapters. So we just emulated that. And we emulated the style, at least. And yeah, we just split it up. I took the 1 and 3. He took 2 and 4. And yeah, stylistically, like I actually played writer and editor for the book. So I did both. And then I decided that we also needed some definitions at the front. I think that was one of the unique things we did with our book, was we opened the book with definitions, and that kind of like set the stage to make sure that when people are reading the book, like we're using the same language. So things like, capital we defined as, time, energy, resources, and then like, intangible capital like ideas, etc. And then capitalism as the process of using those resources more efficiently or more effectively, So we kind of like set the stage for those things, so that way throughout the rest of the book, you couldn't just say, oh, well, what do you mean here? It's like, okay, this is like, let's get on the same page first, and did that. So anyway, it was an interesting process. Like I haven't really collaborated on anything else. I write very well.
Yes, you do.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to say. No, when I'm either pissed off about something, or if I'm writing with someone, I'm such a fucking weirdo. I just take their shit and just like remold it. And I know, I think my writing is very opinionated. So like, if someone, we do this with like our Twitter account with Spirit of Satoshi, for example. We get Spirit of Satoshi to kind of like come up with the first element of the tweet, and then I just go in there and like restructure it and rewrite it. So that was a big way me and Mark worked together. He's very good at like ideating, breaking things down, and then he's like, all right, Svetski, here you go, like turn that into something with like energy or a point behind it. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Very cool. Yeah, it did, absolutely. Yeah. Jason, I know that very recently you just released the audiobook version of your book.
Yes.
Talk to me about that. What was the thought process in figuring that out? Who's going to read it? How did that all happen?
Right. So it's fascinating the different parts that go into a book. Like, you don't. Yeah, I got started. If I would have known how hard it was going to be or how many pieces there were, then I probably wouldn't have done it. So it's good that I didn't know, right? I just go in, write a book. But yeah, so things like, all right, well, now we have to worry about translations and the audiobook and all of that. These are exciting little milestones in like this project that you've given yourself to, right? Like this has been, like almost every waking moment where I'm not like actively at my job or with my kids or with my wife, like it's on this book. So the audiobook just came out. From the very beginning, I said, I just want the audiobook to be done well and professional because this is how most Bitcoiners are going to consume this information. I know that's true for me and for a lot of people out there. I'm doing dishes, I'm listening to a book, I'm listening to a podcast, I'm folding laundry. So I just felt like it was a great milestone, and I think that there's been such a demand. It is the number one question that I would get, like, hey, when's the audiobook coming out? So audiobook is out now, available on Amazon, and I just, like I said, I think that through the course of this book's life, most people will come to it through the audio version and listen to it, and so it was important to get that out there, but to do it in a way that represented my work and to make sure that it was like the message was getting out there in a good way. So, yeah. The first, I'll just add, like, I got to hear some samples of like some people who were going to read it, and the first guy said the word liberal like it was like an offensive like insult, and I said, well, I can't. That's not the point, right? So, like, you have to actually pick the people to read it who give you like the message that you're going for. So. For most Bitcoiners, when you read the word liberal, it's an insult, but like that's not for my book, so to be careful with that.
Yeah, very cool. Well, yeah, we'll pass it back to Svetski, and we'll get our way over there. You talk a lot in your writing about, so many things, but kind of the perversion of reality and of truth by, the people that these gatekeepers, right? Publishing is sort of a gatekeeper game as well. How do you weight the importance of a publisher or the medium? How did you make those decisions when you went about publishing your book and making sure it was someone that was going to promote your work and keep it up there and not try to correct anything that you didn't want corrected? What's the importance of a publisher?
I'm probably the wrong person for that question because, like, first one we didn't publish with anyone, and this one with the Bushido Bitcoin publishing with you guys at Bitcoin Magazine because I guess there's no other Bitcoin publishers, so it kind of just happened.
Well, I think maybe you.
I think we already had a relationship, that's the thing. So like, I wasn't out there like looking for a publisher or anything like that. So the Uncommunist Manifesto we decided to just self-publish because Mark and I didn't know any better, and that actually turned out well because like we had full control over it. So this time, like working with a publisher is a little bit different because I don't have full control, and I'm a pain in the ass to work with, at times. So like, it is what it is, but like it's I guess it's good that there is now a Bitcoin publisher because I think trying to write something like what I wanted to write, particularly with Bushido of Bitcoin, because it's quite radical. There's going to be some things in there that like really rub some people in funny ways.
Let's go.
Yeah, so it's going to be it'll be very, very, very different to any other Bitcoin book out there, and I think I would have had trouble with another publisher publishing it. So, very
cool, awesome. Well, Knut, my man, are there enough Bitcoin books already? I know you're doing your part grandly, but are there enough Bitcoin books?
Yeah, we can stop writing them now. Yes. No, I think we'll see an explosion in Bitcoin books coming here, not only with number go up, but also with the AI revolution. And it's easier to write a book now than before, like in a way. You can use AI for a lot of things. It's cheating a bit, but still, the process of writing a book can be made more efficient, I guess, sort of. Yeah. I talked to Alex about this a lot, and I think we have the same opinion that AI is good for replacing fluff with other fluff, but not very good at coming up with original thoughts, or not good at all. Like, it takes from stuff that is already out there. That's the source of the AI, so it can't really come up with anything original. And speaking of AI, I think calling it intelligence is misleading, because they're leaving out a crucial part of what intelligence is, which is tied to praxiology, and that's agency, that it has a will of its own, because acquiring means to reach certain ends is what humans do. That's human action, and that's missing from AI. So an AI can be a perfect slave, but it can never be Skynet. It can never be its own master. So I think the fears around it are unfounded, and they're missing the most crucial part of what intelligence is, which is agency.
Can you talk a little bit about praxology and what that means, maybe for people that don't understand, just in relation to that?
Praxiology is a term coined by Ludwig von Mises in the middle of the last century, and it is to this what mathematics is to this objective, praxiology is to the subjective. So it's an a priori science, meaning that it's the study of human action, and it's an a priori science, which means that there is no empiricism in praxiology. You have to start from a set of undeniable axioms. The first one being man must act, because if you don't act, you die, like you starve to death. So what is an action? And the second axiom is human action is purposeful behavior. So Mises makes a distinction between instinctual action, like if the doctor hits me at the knee, I do this, but I don't control that. So action is the opposite of that. It's deliberate action. And what human beings do is that we feel uneasy some way, or in some way, or a felt uneasiness is how Mises describes it. And then we imagine a future that could be better for us, and we imagine ways to get that better, into that less annoying state than what we're in. So we always have a hierarchy of wants and needs in our heads, and we prioritize what need is most urgent at all times. So we engage in purposeful behavior. We imagine a future where we have done a thing. So for instance, if I am thirsty, I may decide to open this water bottle and take a sip of water, because I imagine I will be less thirsty if I do so. And if I'm sufficiently thirsty, that will be my the action I take before I take another action. So that is the very, very basics of what praxiology is, and it can tell you a lot about human behavior and about economics, because everything in economics is subjective. Value is subjective. What constitutes homogeneity is subjective too. So what a homogeneous good is subjective. There's a lot of talk in the Bitcoin space about fungibility, but the fungibility is also a subjective thing. One thing may be worth more to a person than to another. There's really no such thing as something homogeneous. It's all in the eye of the beholder, and this can tell you a lot of what economics can and cannot do, what kind of predictions you can and cannot make. So, well, that's the TLDR on praxiology, I guess.
Yeah, incredibly interesting. Excited to read it. I guess we could go to Svetski here. I think there's a weaponization is sort of a dirty word, maybe a misunderstood word. But something that I really get from reading your writing is there's a very tactical outcome that I think you're really going for, and I think it's very intentional and very articulate for a particular reason. Do you think books and writing and articles and magazines, do you think that there's an element of weaponization in your writing and in your work? Do you think that's a bad framing in general for speech? Do you think that's dangerous and stupid? Or do you kind of hold that dear to your heart?
My articles are Glocks, man.
Yeah.
No, I think the point of writing something, and comes back to what you said about agency, right? So, like agency implies an intent, and I think good writing actually is opinionated. It has an intent. Like no one wants to read some sort of like abstract, like I don't have an opinion, blah blah blah. It's fucking boring, right? Like, why do we have stories? Stories like sort of put you in the, like, they introduce you to a protagonist, they introduce you to an antagonist, there's like one side against another, there's a conflict, and there's a point to a story, there's an end, there's a journey, there's something. So, this is actually, in recent years, actually, I've actually stopped reading nonfiction, for example. Like, let me rephrase that. I've stopped listening to nonfiction, hands down. Like, I would never listen to a nonfiction book ever again. Like, I only listen to fiction. If I read, I will read nonfiction, but I do less reading these days because, like, listening to a story for me tells you a lot more. Like, it takes you on a journey, you understand something, and if you look at how human beings have evolved, like, we've learned through stories from the beginning of time, and I think that sort of ties back into this idea of like having a point, having an outcome, having a reason to say something. And, if we want to call that a weapon, sure. Like, depends what you're writing for as well, right? So like generally what I'm writing, the reason I'm writing is to express a frustration or to, tell somebody on the internet something, because that's really important to do, and in doing so, it could be taken as something that is aimed to, like, I don't know, hit someone over the head with a fucking hammer, right? So that's like the idea. So in that sense, yes, it's weaponry. $5 hammer, exactly, or whatever the book costs, $10. Yeah.
Yeah, great answer. Curious, Jason, kind of maybe playing off that a little bit. You just said you kind of wrote the book that you wanted to see that you didn't see out there. How do you sort of validate, or not validate, but rather weigh the success of the book? Is it something where you're, and not to lead the witness here, but is it something where you're like, I articulated my ideas correctly, and that's the success for me, is publishing a well-articulated, or is it like, I want to see this out in the open, I want to see people practicing this, I want sale, how do you view this success as kind of a first-time book writer?
Yeah, so, I guess the short answer is I have no fucking clue, like, what success looks like, right? It keeps changing. So the fact that, I got Peter McCormick to respond to an email, like, that was, I guess, my first success, like, sent an email out to him, and the request was, do you have 15 minutes? I would love to, like, maybe get a quote for the book. And he ended up writing the foreword and being a big supporter. So, like, that was first success, which blew my mind. And ultimately, like, it's hard to answer your question, it's just hard. I think that I can envision a world in which Bitcoin becomes this thing, and, like, people respond to my book differently than there are other books out there. And ultimately, that's already happened. I get people coming up to me and saying exactly what I sat there in front of my keyboard thinking exactly, it's like, hopefully somebody feels like this is good enough to hand to a friend, or, every single person I meet is almost like, I gave this to my sister, I gave this to my mother-in-law, like, this is the book that I wanted out there. People are calling, trying to meet me when I'm at places like this and saying, like, this is the book I was hoping for. And so when you have those conversations, like, that is the success. It's not about necessarily the numbers or how many people are doing that, but, like, those interactions, those face-to-face interactions with real people who say, like, your book, the work that you did, has added value, and I am excited to share it with other people. That's exactly why I wrote the book. Now, I get a lot of people handing my books to politicians, too, and I just want to be clear, like, the politicians are not my target audience. It's the people voting for the politicians. So I do appreciate anytime somebody goes out and buys a copy of my book and hands it to their MP or their congressman, like, hey, that's great. But it's also just start, get the word out to people who do the voting. I think that's what my intention is. And so by any measure, like, the book has been successful. Everything that's happened to me is amazing and humbling. And I'm getting my mind wrapped around like this is not done, like it's still going. So.
Yeah, totally. Well, speaking of done, we'll stay here one more because
Yeah,
we went down that side.
Yeah.
When did you know that the book was done? When did you can work on a book forever?
Yeah.
I think. I don't know. What was the moment that you felt like it was done? What made you feel that way, and why were you ready to press publish?
Yeah, I think that ultimately, from my point of view, from my background, the idea is, well, I want to articulate these ideas as simply as possible to reach an audience who's maybe new to Bitcoin and do that in a comfortable way. And I think that you pour your heart into it, you try to do that, you go back and you say, all right, well, I need to reread these 2 chapters and make sure they make sense, and now that they're in this new order, and now this sentence isn't strong enough here, and you get to the point where you're like, okay, this is it, like I'm done. There wasn't a single moment except a deadline that was like, hey, if you get the book to us by this point, then we might be able to get it published by this point, and the book will be ready for Bitcoin Miami or something. So I was like, okay, well, now I have a target. And as you say, you can keep going forever. But the moment I realized, okay, if I can work from now until 2 weeks from now really hard and just make sure I like every single thing. And that's what I did. And once it's out there, you're not done, right? You're still interacting with people. You're still getting new versions of your thinking going by having conversations and meeting people who read your words and take something different from it, and that's valuable too. So it's almost like it's out there in the world, and people are doing with it what they want, and it's fascinating to see.
Cool, very cool. Alex, I'm curious. You mentioned that you're the editor. Talk us through the process. I mean, your writing is very visceral, very personal, I think, in a great way. How do you go from, like, are you writing in this sort of flow state, whatever, just getting it out and just getting as many words on the paper, then taking a step back and kind of chiseling away at it? Is it does it come out perfect exactly right away? How do you view editing versus the actual creation of the primordial goo?
Yeah, it's funny you said the word chisel, so it's kind of like that. It's like a sculpture, and you keep chiseling away. I saw a little clip recently about some sculptor in Italy, and how he talks about, like, as you're chiseling, a sculpture can take forever. It's so maybe I guess a book is a similar sort of piece of art, right? You keep going in there, you reread things, you rewrite things. I definitely felt that recently in the Bushido Bitcoin, because I've been writing that for a year, and I just kept coming back. And I'd reread a section thinking that last time I wrote that section was like fucking perfect. I reread it and I'm like, this can be better, this can be better, this can be better. And I readjust things. And I'm like, damn, I thought that couldn't be better. And then you come back again. And like, I guess, maybe the thing that's changing is, the sculptor, not the sculpture. And then you come back and you're different in 6 months or 3 months or whatever, and you would kind of, write it again. Like, I know if I went back and wrote the Uncommunist Manifesto now, there would be things that I would change in it. So, like, might need a version 2 down the track or something like that, because I've changed my thinking in many ways. So yeah, I guess, maybe there's something to be said for, like, if you're going to edit a book, like, edit it really quickly so that you can stick with your original line of thought. Otherwise, you'll change it forever. So, like, so I don't know.
Cool. We'll stay here for a second. How do you view writing for different mediums? Like, how do you look at an article, and how do you write differently for an article versus a book, versus a medium, a blog post? Do you look at it and kind of have a different framework, or are you really just like trying to articulate to any medium?
I don't know. I write everything, whether it's books or articles, in sections. So, and each section has a particular argument associated with it. So, I guess, yeah, like an article is just a short version of a book, which, you can deliver a point in a shorter period of, or in a shorter space than you can a book. I guess a book is more challenging, though, obviously, because it's, longer. You have to, like, find coherence, but that's where obviously that's why chapters exist, right? Because you can kind of, like, break the thing down a little bit. And it always, like, it's my pet peeve when so I was helping someone do some writing recently, and like, there's no sections, you know, it's like one block of fucking writing for 8 pages, and I'm like,
Get guilty. I do that.
yeah, dude, I'm gonna shoot you. Like, just like, you gotta like section it out, and you know, that's the first thing I generally go and do. Like, if I'm helping someone edit something, like, I'll go in and like, I'll try and break the sections up a little bit, and I was like, okay, so what are you saying here? And then, okay, like, finish this line of thought, then take someone through the next line of thought, because it's really hard. Like, you know, when you go and read some people's books, and like, they go on and on about a point, for example, and then they sort of weave the next point, you forget what the fuck they were talking about in the first place. Like, it's good to like close it off each time, and I think that, you know, helps people stick with ideas.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Let's talk about talking about books, because I think you clearly do that a lot. And how does the book, once it's done, once it's out there, once you've talked to other people about it, how does the book itself like kind of take on another life as a conversational piece and live beyond kind of the initial publishing?
Yeah, I'd like to first lay out some parts about my creative process, because it's very different from Jason's and Alex. What's this? Two very good sources on how to tame the beast of creativity is John Cleese's short book on creativity, and also 6 Days to Air, which is a documentary about how they make South Park. And in the South Park documentary, Trey Parker writes those scripts in 2 days maximum. And he says that if I had worked on this script for 2 more months, it would have become maybe 5% better. So, and for me this is key, to accept that you cannot be a perfectionist. You have to be like a 95% perfectionist, because otherwise you run into writers, but it becomes a job. So for me, writing has to be fun. I have to enjoy it. So I usually just, like with the first couple of books, I usually just ask myself a question and then try to answer that question as thoroughly as possible. So that's the process. I don't have an outline. I don't have an idea what the book is going to be about. I'll figure that out along the journey. And the praxiology book was the most, like, the book that was most thought out in advance. So I already had like a structure for the chapters and everything. But it was halfway through the writing process that I realized that I can use this Robin Hood example as all the examples in the book. So then it became sort of Robinson Crusoe themed. And there's a little quote from Robinson Crusoe, the actual Robinson Crusoe book, in before each chapter. And because there's so much in economics that can be derived from just Robinson Crusoe being alone on the island, and then you introduce Friday, and then you introduce other people. But I think, to Cleese's book, what he says about creativity is that you need to be, you need to have room to play. So you need to know that you're not going to be interrupted, which is why I usually write in the mornings before my wife wakes up. And like, I differ from Jason because I listen to podcasts to have an excuse to not fold laundry. But yeah, I guess the process can be different each time, and I think that's a good thing in itself, to like not box yourself in too much. And people often ask me, when did you start writing the book? And how the fuck should I know? Like, I know that it's not when I type the first letter in the first chapter. So I probably started writing the book when I was born, because like everything up to that point led up to that. Like you are the sum of your experiences to a large extent, and that's so. Finishing writing a book is easier to say, well, I stopped writing here because there was a deadline. Like, and either I make up the deadline myself. Like for Everything Divided, I decided I wanted done by Bitcoin Miami 2022, so that was my deadline. Like, I need to have it done a couple of months before that to do the editing process and what. But otherwise, like the first book, I promised myself to write a page a day for the whole year, and like all New Year's resolutions, you break them after a certain point. So I wrote 106 pages, and I thought, I think I'm done with this thing now. And so, yeah, creativity is strange, because like you always have the risk of ending up polishing a turd. You know what I mean? You work over and over again on something that wasn't that much of a good idea to begin with. So you need to move on to the next thing, and like have there's a momentum involved. I don't know if that had anything to do with the question you asked, because I completely forgot.
No.
Yeah, and regardless, I think it's really interesting, and I'm very influenced by Python and South Park, so of course. But, I'm curious, like just on that thread, do you practice any sort of like mitigating resources, like as a way to kind of achieve this creativity? Like, do you limit yourself to certain times of when you can write? Do you put deadlines on? Do you anything like that?
Like when I wrote the praxiology book, I borrowed a friend's apartment. So I was alone in that apartment. I'm here to write and drink coffee. Like that's the only two things I'm doing in this house. Maybe taking piss every once in a while, but nothing else. So that's what I did in that house. And like in the mornings, like I'm gonna write something today. So I better get on with it and stop playing stupid computer games and procrastinate. And so I do that. And to the storytelling in general, I don't use like traditional story structures in my writing, but I'm a story structure nerd. I plow hours and hours on end on like dissecting hero's journey type stories and like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones and stuff like that, how they wrote it and why they fucked up Breaking Bad and like, why they fucked up Game of Thrones. Breaking Bad, they never fucked up. It was good all along. But I think there's something to that. I mean, every piece of writing is a story in a sense. So it's good to know that stuff. Be nerdy.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. Alex, you talked about your upcoming book being, kind of a departure of the canon that we have now, which obviously that's exciting. That's awesome. But like, what do you see happening next in the field of Bitcoin writing? What kind of things do people need to start really talking about? Is there anyone in particular that you're really excited about that is doing good work that you appreciate and are excited to see take a bigger role? Well, obviously, of course, all of us, sure. But like, what's next for Bitcoin writing? I mean, obviously, there's a huge canon. There's a decade and a half of writing now. What the hell's next?
I don't know. Next. Look, I think we've already written all the history of money and like why Bitcoin and like the technical stuff and like I don't know. It's interesting what Jace wrote, like because it's a different perspective, and it's got a different spin on it. I guess maybe like I should write the fascist case for Bitcoin or something like that, just to balance things a bit. I don't know. Like that probably hasn't been written yet. I hope this isn't being recorded.
It is, absolutely.
Damn.
Live tweet
Right.
that, everybody.
Here we
Alpha
go.
drop.
But yeah, I think I'm not sure. I think a lot of what's already been written, there's a lot of rehashing of stuff, right? Like it's the whole history of money story has been hammered like so many times. Like we all know now. We all know why Bitcoin's better, all that sort of stuff. So I think that's been taken care of. So it's going to be really interesting. I think Knut earlier said that there's going to be a lot of Bitcoin books written moving forward. And I mean, I just don't know whether they're just going to be a new rehash of the same point or whatever. Like, Bitcoin's really interesting in that there's people that try and relate it to everything. There's Bitcoin and mushrooms, there's Bitcoin and this, there's Bitcoin and that. Like, I don't know. Like, I actually wrote very little about Bitcoin in my book. I wrote more about, I make the assumption in the beginning, which is, hey, I don't want to argue whether Bitcoin's going to win or how it's going to win. I'm just going to take it as a given. Bitcoin wins, okay? And then what? Who do we become? Like, okay, yeah, we've got a bunch of money now. We're the socioeconomic elite. What are we? The next SBF? The next Richard Hart? Are we the next parasitic political people? Like, who do we become? And then I say, okay, well, if we look back in history for some clues, like which civilizations were the most, enduring, the most grandiose, the strongest, the most powerful, etc., and what were the cultures that preceded those? Because generally civilization comes after culture, and then I looked at trying to understand what made those cultures special, And what I found was really interesting was like, whether you go to the Japanese, like, which is what the namesake of the book is, Bushido of Bitcoin. So you look at the Japanese samurai, you look at the ancient Macedonians, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the Arthurian sort of West, like, the chivalric knights and all that sort of stuff. They all shared these similar principles about what made their cultures first strong, cohesive, functional, powerful, etc. And then, they laid the foundation for the civilizations that came afterwards. So, yeah, it's kind of like a book about aspiring and all of this. But yeah, to kind of tie this back into your question, like it didn't even start out as that. Like I just wanted to write something about like virtues, and then it just kind of exploded into something bigger. Like I didn't expect to write more than 30,000 words, but it turned out 100,000 words in the end. So it's much,
wow.
Yeah. So it's a much thicker, longer book than what I originally had. So yeah, I'm curious to see. Like I said, I don't read too much anymore, unless it's like, if I read something, it's got to be like old school, like Nietzsche or something like that. Like I got into Nietzsche this year, which is really dangerous because I was already a fucking psychopath. Now I'm like,
careful out there.
Finding like a kindred spirit. So it's amazing.
Yeah, very cool. Well, unfortunately, I think that's pretty much wrapping up our time here. Really appreciate you guys all joining. I thought it was a very interesting conversation. Excited to check out your work that I haven't seen, and I appreciate the work that I have read. Yeah, thanks so much for being here, and thanks everybody for hanging out.
Thank you.
Check out their work.
Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.